I Peed My Pants, the podcast that's here to break the silence, smash the stigma, and get real about the female incontinence and all things pelvic floor. I'm Ruth Asprey, a women's health champion, therapeutic and hormonal coach, and corporate wellness consultant based in North Wales, working all over the UK. My co-hosts Faye and Lizzie, over to you.
Hey, I'm a specialist pelvic health physio, and I'm super passionate about helping people of all ages, backgrounds, and genders to feel confident in their bodies. Like many of you, I'm not just supporting others, I'm also navigating my own pelvic health journey.
Hi, I'm Lizzie. I'm also a clinical specialist physio in pelvic health. So I run both an NHS and a private clinic. I have to say I love what I do and the brilliant patients that I work with. And I've got first-hand experience too, for I am the proud owner of my very own prolapse.
Oh, well done. Congratulations on
Thanks.
that. So each week we're going to dive into real listeners' stories, your stories. We'll share our thoughts, break down what's going on, and talk about practical ways to make life better. Expect expert advice, honest chats, and plenty of laughs along the way.
We had an amazing response to episode 0. Thank you to all the listeners for sending in their stories. Lizzie and I had a really tough time narrowing it down to one. We've narrowed it down. Ruth hasn't seen this story. So Ruth,
I'm going to pull up the story now.
Can you pull up the story? Are you ready? I have to say I couldn't stop laughing when I read it.
We've got a bit of Valentine's theme going on here. I see a romantic breakfast for two. The urinary I can't even say that. The urinary urgency and a romantic breakfast for two. Right, I'm going to read this out then. I haven't seen this, so let's see. I'll put on my best storytelling voice. My partner and I set our alarms early, determined to catch a beautiful spring sunrise from the top of the meadows. With the dog trotting ahead and a warm flask of coffee in my hand, we set off through the woods, feeling smug about our wholesome start to the day. And then, out of nowhere, the most horrendous, all-consuming urge to pee. How long's she been with a partner, I wonder? Panic sets in. I barely have time to think before I thrust my flask at my boyfriend and bolt towards the nearby field. The gate is ajar. God must love me. And I sprint up the hedge line, being there just far enough that my boyfriend can't see me. And I yank down my trousers and finally, sweet relief, yeah. And then a prickle at the back of my neck. I turn my head. And no more than 10 metres away, a young couple sitting on the picnic blanket, a bottle of champagne. They stare at me, mouths ajar, taking in the full eclipse, yeah. A mortification floods my body. I've had that feeling. I wistfully recall the time when I could stop mid-pee. No, it's all coming out. So powerless to do anything, I finish, pull myself together and leg it back down the field, torn between laughter and tears. I reach my boyfriend breathlessly, red-faced. He listens to my story, howling and pointing out one small detail. When you went to pee, weren't you wearing your coat? Oh no, she left her coat behind. In my frantic rush I stripped my long coat and tossed it aside, not wanting to risk any unfortunate splashes. Oh no, so where was it now? It's still in the field, right by the audience. My boyfriend, crying with laughter, flat refuses to go back. Shoulders up, I set off and walk. She did the walk of shame. So we've got the peeing walk of shame. Past the couple to retrieve my coat. Oh God, the walk of shame. Oh no, hands up who's been there. Me, for sure.
100%, yeah.
Oh no, the poor thing. So she was out in oh my God, that's public humiliation next to the lecture. We've all been there with pee-mergencies.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think about that story? What do you think that scores, Ruth? How humiliating is that on the peeometer? Yeah.
I think for episode 1, that's pretty high on our peeometer, isn't it? Out of 10, I would go 8 on the peeometer. Would you go? Because it's the country, so it's not too bad in the country. If it was city, I think city's scoring high.
Yeah, that would have been 10.
So maybe,
yes, anyone with any city stories, send them in.
City stories are going to be scoring high, so maybe that's country is more like 6 or 7.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good call. It's a good call, I think.
Because we can't have, because otherwise they're all going to be 8 or 9.
I just know those lovebirds are still telling their version of that story.
I know. I wonder if they're sort of yeah. Do you know? I could just imagine them reliving the pale backside that.
I know.
Like traumatized. Oh dear.
I've been there so many times, especially when riding a bike. It's just like oh, that looks like a decent.
You've got bib shorts on as well, have you? How do you get out of those for a wee?
Not very quickly.
Well, I think the cycling chat, yeah, it's a tricky one. You can't, you guy normally wear shorts and not the bibs, because otherwise, if you wear the bibs, then you're taking the whole kit off, so you're practically naked.
That's
and if you wear your undershirt over, but there are some brands which have now got female specific kits, so you're not actually taking. It's just like it's a kind of a quick latch release on the shorts, which is quite good.
I was going to say, is that to the side then? Because I was thinking if you got a zip or something underneath, that'd be a bit chunky.
Yeah,
it's a wee, aren't you, on it? Yeah.
I don't wear them because I think they're a brand, and they're like all stuff with when it comes to female sport kit. I think it's quite expensive. So when you get that urgency, because we always get it, and it's it's a thing that kind of they don't tell you about through perimenopause as well. That urgency to pee, and it hits you like a freight train, and there's nothing you can do. I mean, when you open your front door, you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
What it comes out of nowhere. What can you do? What can women do, Lizzie?
Well, I think it's important to start with why it happens. So it's a mix of things. So lifestyle, bladder habits, pelvic floor function, and then also not forgetting sort of your brain's functioning, all good old fashioned psychology. So I think in this instance, I'm just going to say it now. That was actually my story.
Oh,
plenty more where those came from. I was so proud that Faye picked that out. So I hadn't drunk anything overnight, and I was really, really dehydrated. So you know how your wee is darker in the morning, and that's basically because you haven't drunk much overnight. So dehydrated urine tends to irritate the bladder. Okay, so you've got to remember what wee is. It's your body's rubbish, isn't it? It's all the waste products, which is okay to sit in the bladder if it's nice and dilute. Bit like it's okay to put your hands in diluted bleach, but not in neat bleach. It can cope with the dilute better. Yeah. So if you've got that dehydrated wee, which I was particularly dehydrated that morning, it was just going to irritate the lining of the bladder, and when that happens, the bladder gets irritated and it starts to sort of twitch or squeeze. And it's that twitching or squeezing that gives you that sudden, that really awful urge, because it is different, isn't it, to having a full bladder. You think, oh, I'm bursting for a wee, but there's nothing like that. Sort of that sudden, it's not, it's a horrible pressure, sort of cramping feeling. So so it's that gives you that awful sort of, I'm busting for a pee. And then of course coffee, which it's a diuretic. So it makes I've just had a massive hypocritical coffee this morning. But coffee and tea, more so coffee, the diet. So they dehydrate you more, but also coffee or caffeine, if you like, is a bladder stimulant. So that will sort of stimulate your bladder to be a little bit more twitchy. So basically that flask of coffee plus my poor dehydrated urine in my bladder, it was just a bit of a ticking time bomb, really. So so your bladder basically, it just couldn't wait to get rid of it. It's just, do you know what, I've had enough of this, I'm going to give it a good squeeze, she needs to get rid of this. And that's essentially what that type of urge is.
Right, okay, so on that, because there's 2 really important points there, isn't there? And correct me if I'm wrong on this, please girls. So I was not aware of the hydration issue with affecting bladder control. So I knew about the coffee, that coffee triggered it. So the hydration, when you say your urine's darker in the morning, so does that mean, because this is it's kind of like a catch-22 situation with a lot of women, isn't it? You kind of think, I'm not going to drink because I want to go to the toilet, and then there's no toilet around. But actually, by being dehydrated, you're actually causing that peeing situation. That for me is I just did not know about that, and that's a game changer, because I know so many women who say, God, I can't, and especially I've noticed women who say, when at the end of the day, so if you haven't drank anything in work as well, and you're rushing to get home, and I call it the opening of the door the key in the door, key in the door, and all of a sudden the key in the door, and you're legging it to the toilet.
It's actually a thing, isn't it, Faye, the latchkey syndrome?
Wow, that's so making sure we're hydrated, and also watching our coffee intake as well, the caffeine intake. And that's tea as well, isn't it? It's not just caffeine.
Tea, green tea, isn't it? And I don't know about you, Faye, a lot of
chocolate, Coke,
chocolate,
pre-workout drinks, decaf, they all have caffeine in.
Yeah.
So any caffeine related drink.
Yeah, and when we're not saying don't drink caffeine, because I'm sitting here with my coffee, but I know that I've also got a cup of water that I've had this morning. I've been for a wee and I've got a loo out there, so I'm just sort of thinking, can I access the toilet? Whereas if I hadn't had any of this water this morning, straight to the coffee, I'd probably be sitting here rocking, needing the toilet.
That's really, really interesting. I make a rule that I always, before I have any tea and coffee, I always start the day off with a big glass of water. Being somebody who does a lot of endurance sports, I always check my pee. So it's a kind of measure to see whether I'm dehydrated or not. So maybe on just thinking about this to support our listeners and women, we could put the pee checker up in the community group.
Yeah.
So you can check, because sorry to go back to cycling again, ladies, but in the buses of the pro cycling teams, in the toilets, they have the pee checkers. So
and like they do in the hospital, like the different colours.
Yeah, the different colours. So I know through that, when I'm dehydrated and when I'm not, and it's always clear. But so many women that I talk to they don't know about checking their pee. So maybe we could put a chart up on our community group, which we could talk about later. So why couldn't so that's about the urgency. So why couldn't Lizzie stop peeing? Why couldn't you stop it? Like you go, oh, I'm going to stop it. Why, Faye? Why couldn't Lizzie stop peeing?
Good question. First of all, we need to know how the bladder works. So the bladder, it's a muscly bag. You can think about it a bit like a balloon. And so every minute of the day, your bladder is expanding with urine, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it gets to a point about half full where it sets off stretch receptors, and that sends a signal to your brain. And that's when you start to get the feeling of like, oh, my bladder's filling, I'll start to need the loo soon. You shouldn't get a strong urge, first of all. Then when it gets even more full, you're going to get more signals being sent to the brain, and you're going to think, right, I'm going to go to the toilet now. So remembering that the bladder is a muscle, fancy name for it is the detrusor muscle. Some of you might have read that in some like outpatient letters you've had from the hospital, if you've ever had your bladder looked at. So the detrusor muscle. So then you go to the toilet, you take your knickers down, sat down on the loo. How does the wee come out of that bladder? Well, the muscle then squeezes. So the bladder itself is squeezing. You don't control it. It's autonomic muscle. It's a bit like your heart. You don't sit here thinking heart muscle squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. So you sit on the loo, the bladder muscle is squeezing, but at the same time, your pelvic floor is relaxing. And it's all doing that job automatically. So I think when your pelvic floors relax, you need really good control to be able to squeeze that pelvic floor, because it's got to overcome the bladder squeezing and turn the bladder off.
Right. Okay.
Now, I think with Lizzie, I think this is pre-kids days. So I think there are a couple of things as to why she couldn't turn it off. One, that bladder is squeezing really hard because of the caffeine, because the urine's really, really diluted. And also a habit, probably at this point, Lizzie's just used to having a full bladder empty. And so her brain just cannot coordinate with her pelvic floor to squeeze it. What do you think, Lizzie? Is that right? What was going on there?
Yeah, no, I reckon. I was just thinking as well, the squatty position.
Oh, yeah. So it's got your pelvic floor on a stretch, hasn't it?
Yeah. Like
so when your muscle's on a stretch, it's so much harder to activate it. So if you think about, you've got to pick up something really heavy, a lot of the time what you'll do is bend your arms to pick it up to start with. You won't have your arms fully extended to pick something up. You'll slightly bend them because otherwise your muscles are on a full stretch. If you're in that squat position, your pelvic floor's on a full stretch, so it's going to be much harder to squeeze it.
Yeah, but really, I was pre-kids. I should have been able to do that. It's a bit disappointing. But
so that's really interesting. So if you're in a squat position and you've got your arms bent, then your pelvic's more likely to be open and compromised. So we should be squatting down with our arms out wide and then pulling it up. Is that what we're saying? Maybe we need to cover off that in a separate episode.
Yeah, no, I think I think Faye was just using sort of, were you using that as a bit of I think that was just an example. She was just trying to say, well, actually, it's much harder to pick up something with your arms
stretched, it is,
versus arms bent. So what she was saying was when you squat, your pelvic floor is on a full stretch, so it's much harder for your pelvic floor
to close
that. Yeah. She was just using the arms as an example, but which is why so that in itself
makes it quite hard.
Gosh,
and also
you can really start to see how all of this has a knock-on effect on women's day-to-day function, can't you? And moving around and going to the gym, it has a huge impact.
Yeah, it has. And then I was just wanting to go through that sort of psychological part of it as well. I know Faye's covered it. So the fact that the bladder stretches sends a signal to the brain, oh, this is how much is in the bladder. And then you do have that option then, don't you, Faye, of your brain kind of going, well, can I be bothered? Is there a toilet? Can I be bothered? Do I just need to finish this task in hand? And you can kind of go, oh, I'll just ignore it and I'll come, and so your brain can shut down the bladder signals. So if you like, bladder signals goes up the spinal cord to the brain, and your brain decides what to do with it. And you say, oh, I'm just going to finish this task. So then you can just ignore it and the bladder will sort of just quieten down, absolutely fine, and then it'll fill again. But as soon as you hit that panic button of like, oh my goodness me, I really need a wee, you've lost that level of inhibition. Does that make sense? You've lost that switch. So, and I think it's interesting, we see this, don't we, quite a lot, Faye? And I think for me, if I'd have been in public and I'd gone, oh my goodness, I need a wee, and then, I don't know, for whatever random reason, I completely wet myself, it only takes that one episode, doesn't it, to then set up every time you need a wee, you're going to hit the panic button, aren't you, and go, oh, because of what just happened. So that's one way of inhibiting it, is the brain. So if you hit that panic button, you've lost that. I'd say that's your major form of sort of shutting your bladder down, just kind of being calm and thinking, oh, it's all right, I can get to the toilet, or I'll just ignore it. And then the other way, obviously, is the pelvic floor, like Faye alluded to, where you think, oh, it's usually that tends to come in when we're a little bit more desperate. You sat in the car journey waiting to get to, the services or something like that, and you really are busting for a wee, and that's often when we start to just squeeze the pelvic floor. And then Faye was saying earlier that you've got to have a decent, strong, consistent squeeze then to be able to shut that bladder down. So that's quite hard, isn't it? Especially postmenopausally, post-children, you might have that lack of confidence that your pelvic floor is able to do that. So, or it might actually be quite weak, and then you're going to hit the panic button. It's also mingled in, isn't it? It's really quite interesting. But yeah. So, and the other thing I did want to say was, for any ladies listening, just because you can't stop a wee on the toilet, it doesn't mean that your pelvic floor is dead. It just means, just saying. So there's a link. So you've got to have very good control. So without getting too boring, it's a spinal cord reflex. You're not meant to stop your wee mid-flow. Your bladder wants to empty. It should just empty. Some people can interrupt it mid-flow, and that sort of it's nice if you can do that, because then you think, oh, I can do that, that's great. But if you can't, people just presume that the pelvic floor is dead, and it's not. It's just that you can't interrupt that reflex. So there's no direct correlation between being able to be on the loo and how strong your pelvic floor is. It's more how Faye said, it's more that sort of indication of your awareness and control of the pelvic floor. Just thought I'd add that in as a side note in case anyone felt disappointed.
I've got a feeling that we're going to come back to this topic throughout the series. I've got a feeling this urge is, am I right saying that this is how to manage urgency when we want, so it's the theme of urgency. So Faye, what would Lizzie do to avoid another pee-related walk of shame?
Oh, the classic drink. I know it's counterintuitive, like you were saying earlier, Ruth, that when you're worried about needing a loo, a lot of us just won't drink, will we?
No.
But like we were explaining earlier, if you're not drinking, your urine's going to be more concentrated and you're going to need the loo more because it's irritating your bladder. So ideally, we want to keep your bladder calm and drink the right things. Water's the classic, milk, herbal teas, not green tea, even decaf, although it does have caffeine in it, it's got much less. And then also sipping your drinks rather than gulping them.
Right.
What some new research has shown is that if you're downing pints of water, that's going to be flushed through your system really quickly, and it's going to lead to like a sudden stretch of the bladder, and therefore that's going to send off like some strong messages to the brain that you really need the toilet. So sip if you can. And you want to be aiming for an average size woman in the day about 1.5 to 2 liters of fluid. Now if you're cycling like you are and super sweaty, then you're going to need more, aren't you?
Yeah.
Super sweaty.
Super sweaty.
You're going to need more, and like, yes, you're going to look at your pee like you were talking about earlier. But yeah, drink.
So my strategy of having a pint of water as soon as I get up, is that not a good idea? Because I always have a big glass. I always have like a big glass of water before I hit the tea.
I guess it depends, doesn't it? It depends. Like, are you experiencing lots of urgency? Have you got symptoms? I think all of this is really symptom based.
Yeah, I can talk at length about my sense of urgency. I can talk at length about the sense of urgency that's come on later on in life. I mean, it's actually, the one thing that I have done, which goes to Lizzie's point earlier, I am much more conscious of the caffeine intake now, and that seems to have helped quite a lot. So although I have caffeine in the morning, I don't tend to have caffeine post 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
For sleep.
And everyone's really individual. Like, there are with all of this, when we treat people, we treat the individual, and it's not 100% of people that these things apply to. We do have the rare people, don't we, the diamonds, Lizzie, that just the caffeine doesn't irritate the bladder. It's not what's driving their symptoms. So it's a case of like reflecting and sort of tracking your symptoms and thinking like, you know, did I down that pint? About half an hour later, I was absolutely desperate for the loo. Well, then you know the two are linked, aren't you? But if you're downing that pint, you've got no problems. Don't worry about it, Ruth. Don't worry about it. Keep going. Water's good.
Any other tips, Lizzie?
I have got a few tips, but if I flip back to that caffeine thing, because this is really funny. One of my very first memories of doing clinics, I had my lovely patient who we shall call, I don't know, Betty. And Betty literally drank buckets of fresh black coffee all day. And I wanted what Betty wanted, which was for her not to be weeing everywhere constantly. Like literally, she would go to the toilet every 15-20 minutes. So anyway, long set. She's like, but I can't give up coffee. We came to a real loggerheads. And I was like, well, you're going to have to just enjoy wetting yourself. So in the end, it was so funny. In the end, we got down to should have gone away and have had a good think about it, and she'd have a bucket of coffee in the morning and literally wee about 10 times between 8 and 9 o'clock, and then she wouldn't have more for the rest of the day, and she was fine. But that really taught me something about what I want and what the patient wants is very different. Also, it's a constant compromise. I've never forgotten it. I saw her in the supermarket about 6 months ago, and it was like, you know, our eyes met across the supermarket.
it's really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's like, you know, it's that personal responsibility. You know, you can only give people the information, and then it's really personal choice about whether they want to take that, you know, whether that they want to change their behaviour, whether they're ready to change their behaviour. I think,
that's,
you know, and that's the key thing with all of this information. So
you were sorry, Ruth, you were asking top tips, weren't you? I think my first tip would be, if you have a boyfriend that's actually that mean, get rid of him. That was my tip for the top. I mean, it did last a little bit longer after that, but you know, I could see the funny side of it now, not at all at the time. But on a more serious note, if you do get that sudden urge, if at all possible, is just trying not to panic. So we do a lot of that with the patients, you know, taking a deep breath, trying to just relax your whole body, because actually clenching makes it worse. And actually clenching, you probably squeeze absolutely everything but your pelvic floor as well. So just try and distract yourself is another one. You know, anything counts as distractions. You know, you could count backwards, you could just switch the TV on. You know, I would say don't go and do the washing up or clean the toilets or anything water related or bathroom related, because that will cue it. But yeah, if you can sort of just distract yourself or sort of think, yeah, I need the toilet, the urge will often pass in maybe 30 seconds or so if you just don't give up straight away. And then a strong pelvic floor. So ideally, you know, a half squeeze. So if we said 100%, a full squeeze would be 100% effort. You know, I always say to patients, don't get bogged down in what's half or 50%. Just a decent squeeze of your pelvic floor, just not the full hit. And that can often do wonders for just delaying and sort of settling down the urge. So you probably need to be able to hold it for a good 20 seconds or more. So yeah, and it's also about setting yourself up for success, isn't it? So it's practicing these things, not when you're at a wedding or, you know, stood making a speech, or, you know, that's not the time to practice in the situation. It's practicing around the house. So can you practice your pelvic floor squeezes when you're not urgent, when you don't need a wee? I often get, and Faye will do this as well, get your patients, or I sort of say, well, practice your half squeeze. Can you get from the kitchen to the toilet? Can you go up and the stairs? Do it when you don't need a wee. So you're practicing for the situation rather than in the situation. And then when that urge comes across you, because it's so well practiced, you're like, oh, I'm all over this. You know, I do this all the time. It's a bit more automatic. It's a good habit to get into. And then I did want to touch on, you can actually drink too much, can't you, Faye? So less often, but you do get people that come in that are literally drinking 4 litres of fluid a day. I think because a lot of the social media is like, you must drink 2 litres of water, must drink 2 litres of water. So you drink your 2 litres of water, and then they're also drinking 10 cups of coffee, Pepsi, whatever on top of that. So, and if I drank that much, I don't think I'd have time to work. I literally would be sat on top of the toilet all day.
People think that you see people in the gym, and they've got those really
massive
expensive water bottles, haven't they? That I think are about 50 quid, and they're just drinking and they're carrying them around everywhere with them. And it's like, I mean, it's again, it's really, it goes back to that chart, doesn't it? Being aware of what colour your urine is, and then readjusting your fluid equilibrium.
I often
so I know we'll probably cover this off in more, the pelvic floor exercises in more detail in up and coming, because it's such a big topic, isn't it? But just as we're talking about them now, how do we do them and when do we do them, Faye? The pelvic floor. What's like a really quick and easy thing that women can take away today with the pelvic floor?
Oh, we get asked this all the time. So Lizzie and I had a chat about this and decided to make a little guide. So we'll be popping a guide to why the pelvic floor is so amazing, how to do it, how often, how to find them, answering every question we've been answered in clinic. No questions too silly. We will know what your question is and we will have answered it in this guide. And then any questions, you can pop them in the Facebook group.
Brilliant.
So the video will be in the Facebook community as well, the Oops, I Peed My Pants podcast community. So yeah, and we'll perhaps be on hand at the time to answer any questions.
Yeah, I mean, just out of that, I've got like, there's just out of this conversation this morning, we've got five, I've made a point that, there's probably five top tips that we've covered off today, around hydration, caffeine, exercises, mindset, in terms of training the mind, how the mind control the bladder, which is a really great one, I think, so there's a lot to kind of cover off there. So thank you for being vulnerable, Lizzie. That vulnerability, I mean, opening up, which is really what we want, isn't it? We want, this is impacting so many people, pelvic health, and having to go to the toilet, those moments where, whether you're in central London, in the city, or in the country, we all get that that moment of kind of like that urgency, which brings me on to our topical piece of our podcast, what's leaking this week, which is where we're going to cover off things that are happening in the broader society around, not just specifically around pelvic floor, but also about women's health in general. So we might cover off different things, right? Menopause related, or things that we've seen, or things that, I mean, I'm really interested in the campaign, what's going on in society as a general to support women's health, and also what's happening on the ground with you guys, with your work within the NHS. So what have you spotted this week, Faye?
Today we're talking about a campaign that's all about something we need to talk about, but we don't talk about enough, and that's public toilets. So did you know that the number of public toilets has dropped by a staggering 40% since the millennium? So that's right, fewer loos means more people are struggling to go about their daily lives. The British Toilet Association, I didn't know such a thing existed, has launched the Legalise Loos campaign, calling for the government to make public toilet provision a legal requirement rather than leaving it up to local councils to decide.
Yes, brilliant.
So this issue affects everyone, whether you're out shopping, travelling, exercising, or just trying to live your life without constantly worrying about where the nearest toilet is. And the numbers are shocking. 1 in 5 people will limit their travel due to lack of public toilets.
Yeah.
And this impacts people with incontinence disabilities, and it affects the economy.
Yeah. I've had clients who I've been coaching who have said they're going away to London for the weekend and they needed to know where the toilets were and they couldn't travel around. And I was like, what? This was going back a few years before I was more informed, but it's a huge inconvenience. Just on that, locally in North Wales, some of the local county councils there in one of the Denbighshire, where I'm based, because I know you guys are covered by your Conway, aren't you, or are you Gwynedd?
Gwynedd.
Denbighshire are looking to close public toilets, so it's probably something. I think this is a good thing that we need to get behind then on the podcast, and maybe because I'm loving the British Toilet Association. I think we need to get them on, because that 40% since 2000 is a figure that's a shocking figure. That's an absolutely shocking number that's on the decline, because you've got public accessibility going down, but you've got we've got health issues going up.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sure a lot of them closed in COVID. So COVID was a funny time, wasn't it? Where our patients were like, oh, actually everything's okay, because you couldn't go out of your house, so you always had a toilet. But then when everyone started to go out of the house, all the public toilets were still shut. It was awful. It was awful.
And now they're trying to shut them permanently. So we need to get. So it's not just about the it's not just about public health. It's also having a huge impact on our towns, because public toilets see a 30% more footfall in traffic. We know that when you have public amenities in towns, so it's kind of like they're shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, I think I read somewhere that Soho lost, when some of the toilets shut in Soho, I think it affected businesses by about £5 million. I mean, I know people that go.
Soho is pretty bad.
Yeah, I remember them. They were beautiful Victorian
underground
rooms.
ones. Yeah,
Yeah,
next to Liberties. Yeah,
I think one of them
It's a bar, isn't it?
Bar, yeah. I think I've fallen out there. The sad thing is I probably fell out there when it was a loo, and I probably fell out there when it was a bar.
The bar.
Anyway.
So this is
where
why
are we?
the British Toilet Association is calling on the government to make toilet provision a legal duty rather than a choice.
I'm loving
So
that.
as public health expert Sir Michael Marmot puts it, public toilets are as essential as streetlights, roads and waste collection. We wouldn't accept a 40% drop in streetlights, so why do we I'm
actually staggered by this. I mean, I'm glad it was a man as well, because men do have problems too, ladies.
Yes, yeah.
I can't leave my male patients out of this, but I'm just sort of thinking a lot of them, and they all need. Not only do we need a loo, we need one. We need more. Like how it's only the disabled toilets that have the sink in there. We've got so many women. I am going a bit off piece here. So many women that have to self-catheterize, and men, and change the pads. And you can't be like shuffling in and out the toilet with your. Imagine I've got a vision of like shuffling out the toilets with your drawers halfway down your, like trying to wash your hands, get back into like it's just not practical, is it? So we need more toilets and ones with sanitary bins and
when you're talking about public loos, then I just remember I drove through Germany this year on my way to an event in Switzerland, and oh my God, the loos in Germany. Okay, they were on the motorway and they were paid, they were about €1 or something, but they had mechanical. It was all digitized. The seat washing. You press this button.
Wow.
Yes, I was like, oh my God, I wish I'd taken a video of it now. It went, and I was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. But this is, with technology now. I mean, look, we don't have enough time to cover this off today. I think it is a campaign that we could get behind, especially within our own area with things. So let's connect with the Toilet Association, and then let's get behind this, because I think it has a huge impact, not just like you said, Lizzie, not just on women's lived experience, but also men as well. Yeah. So how do women get involved with the show? How do we want women to get involved with the show?
So we want to hear from you, ladies and gentlemen, if you need to be. So listeners, you can submit your stories and questions via our email. That's oopsIpeedmypantspodcast@gmail.com. Then we've got the Facebook community, so that's Oops, I Peed My Pants podcast. And there will be a link there to a Google form, and then that will be up on our website as well.
Oh yes, get your Google forms in, ladies. It's all in, it's anonymous, isn't it, Faye, as well? So
yes,
we can't trace it back. We're not gonna trace it back.
Not gonna out you.
Yeah. I'll out myself for everybody.
Yeah, I've got plenty of. I'll be out, as they say. So so we're looking to reframe the narrative around incontinence together. Just one thing though that we just want to cover off is that if women have, or anybody listening to the podcast have any concerns, this isn't they should get themselves down to their GP ASAP.
Yep, absolutely. And then the GP can decide, can't they, then, where do all the necessary tests if they're required, or send yourself to an amazing pelvic health physio like Faye, or
Lizzie.
Thanks.
Brilliant.
Didn't want to blow my own trumpet, but
100% blow it.
Yeah, I think the main thing is go and there is help. That's the main thing. Don't put up with it, isn't it? That's what I say.
Don't put up with it. No,
don't put
absolutely.
up with it. Go and get help.
Right. Excellent. So all the show notes will be below. You can join us on our Facebook group, the link below. Fantastic for the first episode. And looking forward to breaking the silence, one laugh and leap at a time. Have a great day, and we will be back next week.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Oh, I thought that was